Hi, welcome to the 382nd episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patrons Maddie Delk, Liam Devine, and Emilio Torres. I'm Matt Enlow.
And I'm Oren Kaplan, and today it's another episode of your favorite thing that we do, complaining about the film industry. But really talking about being overwhelmed with things that you are responsible for, talking about work. I mean, I think it's so funny because you always make fun of me for this, but I am just complaining when I don't have any work and complaining when I have work. And I think the pendulum has swung in a very weird way. I was really bummed because there weren't nearly as many jobs as I think we're usually used to at the beginning of this year. And now we both just happen to have like crazy busy weeks, and I do feel very lucky. I know there's 2 unions in town that are on strike, and a lot of people are on the picket lines asking for a fair deal from the producers, the AMPTP, the studios. Neither one of us is working with those studios right now, which is why...
That is an important thing to call out for sure.
Yeah, which is why we can work. We feel super lucky that we have jobs and that we're filming and shooting and doing directing stuff. But I am just having one of those weeks where I just cannot catch up with anything I'm responsible for. And I feel like I'm constantly letting down people that are counting on me to do things. And I thought we would talk about it a little bit today. I know you also bit off a little bit more than you could chew, and maybe we'll tell each other our stories, and then we will give each other advice. And the hope here is that you, dear listener, have also experienced this in your own life.
Yeah, maybe we have a little bit to add to it. I'll say this. Most of the time when you pitch a complaining episode,
you complain about it.
I'm like, yeah, I complain about it. I've never said yes faster.
Yeah, I just caught you on a good day, on a good bad day.
Yeah, I was just like, yeah, I got some stuff to say. But yes, just to echo your point about being really fortunate that we are working, that is really important. And before we get into it, yeah, the strike stuff, for people who are listening a little bit later, not right when the episode drops, SAG just joined the strike a few days ago, basically. And my office is, I basically drive down pass in Burbank, like along the perimeter of Warner Brothers, and I always honk. I'm always engaged. My daughter loves it when we honk. Day one, you honk. It's like nonstop. Warner Brothers has put up signs that say like excessive honking is illegal, and like you're just like, it makes you want to honk louder, and everyone's into it. This last week, prior to SAG joining, people were a little tired, noticeably more tired. You're losing steam. But bro, when you add, God, how many, like
160,000.
It is a different deal. Like the turnout is wild. And just as a tiny anecdote, because it makes me really emotional. We talked about our careers kind of both started the last time there was a strike. It's something I really care about, and it's complicated stuff. Anyway, I was working late and walked over to meet my wife at the Smokehouse. Are you familiar with the Smokehouse?
Oh yeah, I get all my cigarettes there.
You get all your cigarettes there, yeah. No, it's the steakhouse across the street from Warner Brothers.
Oh yeah,
and it's like old school, red leather, low lights. They have pictures of celebrities up on the wall who frequent the restaurant. And I just sat at the bar and had a drink because I was waiting for my wife. And I was literally surrounded by, on both sides, stunt performers just telling tales. Like dropping names, talking about how they missed that person, and like how this person set the world record for the biggest free fall or whatever. Just like old timers talking about doing stunts. But it just filled me with, I don't know, just like a sense of pride and happiness. The reason we moved to Los Angeles, and one of the main reasons that the city is great, is because of the entertainment industry. Again, it was like pretty emotional just to be like surrounded by people out of work, working class people, put their bodies on the line. And we're just all talking about the same things. So anyway, enough about the struggle of the collective action. Oren, lay it on me. Why are you feeling overwhelmed?
So I have this philosophy as a freelance director that anytime anyone asks you if you're available for a job, you say yes.
You say yes, yeah.
The only time you can say no is if you have booked a job officially that shoots on the exact same dates, and you're 100% sure it's going to shoot on those dates. if someone says, hey, we're thinking of hiring you for a job August 2nd, and then someone else says like, hey, are you available August 2nd? You say, yes, I am available August 2nd. Because 9 out of 10 times someone asks you about a job on a certain date, either you will not get that job. Oh, by the way, I'm in a haunted hotel room right now, and my phone keeps ringing. One ring, and I pick it up. No one says anything. Then I unplug the power. Keeps ringing. I unplugged the phone cable, and it is still freaking ringing. Did you just hear it?
That's pretty impolite for a Canadian ghost.
Oh yeah, no, you pick it up, and they're just like, sorry. And then I've noticed Canadians just say sorry all the time. Sure. So weird.
Yeah. So we know they're Canadian.
Oh yeah. So speaking of, I'm in Toronto. Most jobs that anyone tells you about as a director, and the longer you do this, the more you'll realize this. Most of them go away. Either the job goes away, you don't get it. Like trust me, when someone's like, "Hey, we'd love for you to direct this job," there's like at least a 50% chance that they're talking to other directors that they would also love to direct the job.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But they just aren't telling you that. But there's also just a really high chance the date will change. I never say no to a job unless I am 100% booked on another job. So I happened to get into the situation where I, pitched on this job shooting in Toronto. It's a pretty big job. It's a 6-day shoot, 5 days in Toronto and a day in LA. I pitched on it in April or something, and it just kept moving and getting postponed. And then I had this 2.5-week vacation, and it's now shooting for 5 days, which means I need to be here prepping for a few days before that. So I have 10 days in Toronto. And this is just coming off of a 2.5-week trip to Israel, where I had, I think, a week in LA. And in the meantime, I also pitched on another job while I was in Israel that was supposed to shoot the same time. And luckily they were willing to move it to the following week, August 2nd. So now I am effectively shooting this kind of massive job. And when I say massive, I don't mean budget wise. I mean, the budget is fine, but massive time-wise. Yeah.
It's worth mentioning, typically your bread and butter is in commercial film directing. This is a long form, still a commercial in so much as the process was the same and all that, but it's a proper script. What's the runtime is what, 30 minutes?
Probably about an hour. They're aiming for 30 minutes, but realistically, I think it's going to be about an hour. So it's this really big project. So it's for a brand, and then I'm doing at the same time. So
all the trappings of a commercial. So all of the approvals, stakeholders, it's not like it's you and a showrunner and a studio. There's a agency and producer, the agency and client as well.
And if you know anything about that brand in particular, they are very visual. Their aesthetics are on point, all about taste and style and trends and what people are into. Nothing can look remotely bad. Everything has to be great, right? Visually, aesthetically. I think the final runtime will be between 45 minutes and an hour, but it's a lot of different segments. And I'm having to shoot a lot of scenes where I shoot half of the scene on one day and the other, the reverse angle of the scene on another day, just because actor availability and
matching it is no problem. But dialogue scenes, especially when you're hiring great comedic actors, it's fun for them to riff and to improvise a little bit. And when things are so separate, it's really hard to have them react off of one another. There's a little bit of hedging you can do, but for the most part,
Yeah. But also we're also using comedic actors and real people mixed together. And it's not I'm doing that for one scene. I'm doing that for 9 different scenes, just keeping track of everything. And everyone is very important. That's a part of this. So that means their schedules are really hard to juggle. So it's just been this massive puzzle piece on these really long, just tons of scripts and revisions and notes. And it's something that you could easily spend a month on and still feel you have more things you could do. I could be storyboarding more. I could be...
Well, and let me ask, because I was highlighting the nature of what makes it similar to a commercial, but I think what you're describing, because it's long form...
It's basically like a short feature film.
But there's no...
With agency and client giving their opinions on every single decision you make.
But there's also no script department, let's say, or anyone whose job is to track the changes. It's you and a writer, right? So like if it was a television show or if it was a feature, there'd be a person in charge of tracking those changes, issuing new pages, you know, there's color coding systems and all of that stuff. But that's a lot of actual work, you know, like tangible work, and software makes it manageable, but there's still somebody who typically is, even if it's just a writer's assistant, doing all that stuff. But I wouldn't be surprised if, because it's a commercial and that's not part of a regular commercial workflow, because we're talking typically about a handful of scripts, that it's easy to keep track of. You just version up, whereas like tracking changes on a line by line basis or scene by scene basis becomes just a different job. Yeah,
it's tricky when you approach like a narrative project like it's a commercial. I mean, I think we're doing actually a pretty decent job. We're using Google Docs instead of like Final Draft. But there is like, you know, sometimes we'll get an idea and we'll be like, oh, what if like, wouldn't a flower pot be like a better thing than a lamp here? And we'll write it in, but there's no one like in a regular production. There's someone's job, like you said, to get that somehow to the art department, you know?
Yeah, to disseminate.
So you show up on set, and you have a flower pot instead of a lamp. And here it's like kind of my job because I'm the only person from production that's deep into the script, you know,
right.
Because there's so many moving parts and so many scenes and so many things that there's no way the line producer or the production designer or anyone could track all these changes. So it's like, it's a puzzle. It's totally working and I'm excited. And we're like 2 days out from the shoot and I feel really good about everything. But has been like, I was up till, you know, 10 p.m. last night with like 5 people on a Zoom, just rereading the script and giving all our final notes and things. And all that is to say, it would be totally fine. No problem. Just a really, really involved, complex, complicated job. But at the same time, I'm prepping for this other shoot, right? So tomorrow morning, before I go do the walkthrough with the client and the agency for this project, I have to do 3 hours of casting for my other project that I booked. And then also the producer is like, when can you meet with the storyboard artist? We need storyboards. Those are due on Monday, which by the way, I'm filming Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So it's not like I can sit with a storyboard artist for 2 hours. They're saying, we haven't hired a DP yet. Like, hey, like we need you to like send us DP names. We need to vet things. We need the client to approve people. The production designer wants to have like an hour-long meeting with me. The agency wants me to have a meeting with the client to sell through the locations. And they also want me to have a separate meeting with the client to convince them to hire the actors that I want to hire.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I have notes on the script, you know?
Yeah. You want it to be good also on top of all that. Yeah. I mean, I think that we've said it before, the problem with commercial jobs or kind of any job is that there's no understanding that you might have to, that you're doing multiple things for multiple people. According to your client and your production company, they're the only client in the world.
Right. They're paying you to work for them today.
Yeah. And so, look, it's different on a shoot day. It's different. But you still have your lunches if you need to pitch or
well, that's literally what they're like. They're like, what time is your lunch going to be on Monday? And I was like, I have no idea, where everything is in such flux. And like, if my lunch is over and now we have the client and the agency and all these people just waiting for me and I'm not there, that looks bad also. But so I have a piece of advice actually for that specifically. Are you going to say get the producers together?
Yeah, but the problem is that the job you're currently on is your Canadian reps, and the other job is your U.S. reps.
Correct. Which 2 cool companies, by the way. I'll just plug them. Undivided in Canada and Art Class in the U.S.
Awesome stuff. If they were both Undivided or if they were both Art Class,
they would manage that within themselves.
They'd be able to manage it for you. Exactly. So that's. I was going to say, get the producers involved, and they might still be able to help, but like it would be out of the kindness of their hearts or their investment in you and not anything else, which is like a lot harder than like it being the business of the company, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I did want to just tie this back a little bit to the strike of like why we can't just say, hey, I have a job, I'm going to turn down everything else, is because let's say you're a director and you got this awesome job and it's going to pay you $50,000, right? And you worked for months to get it. And then you're working on it for months. And then you're in post on it for months. Like, guess what? That is like, you're saying no to all these other jobs and you're saying no to these people that might stop calling you. And now all of a sudden it's the only job you had that year. And $50,000 might be great, in some parts of the country, in some parts of the world. But in LA, like that's like a poverty wage if you're raising a family, for an annual, for the year. So we have to be like constantly taking these multiple jobs. I was like, and by the way, a lot of the jobs pay significantly less than that, right?
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to say no. And I understand the producers too. They're like, well, Oren, we hired you for this job. You said you wanted to do it. And now you're telling me you have no time to storyboard. You have no time for casting. You have no time to take the client through locations. You have no time to like send us your shot list. And so we talked before we started recording that what Jordan Brady would say, which is like, just do the
Muscle
work.
through it.
Yeah.
And stay up late, get it done.
I'm trying to do that. So I also have a VFX job right now for like a studio film, and they sent me a bunch of notes today. I finished everything, but today they sent me a bunch of notes for new notes, which is, just like 4 or 5 hours worth of work. But, I don't know when I'm going to do them. And then on top of all of this.
And also, it's a lot harder to stay up. Like if you're even pitching, it's kind of in a gray area, but shooting, I need my sleep, man.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to be full energy on your feet, answering questions, needing hyper focus for 12 hours a day for 5-6 days in a row. So like, and also, you're probably going to have to schmooze a little bit and go out for dinner and all of that stuff. And so every moment of sleep counts.
Yeah. And when you're in a different time zone, I'm really bad. Like right now it's already past midnight. And it's like you're working so hard to like get on a sleep schedule. But then when someone from California calls you and they're like, it's 9 PM, can't you just work on this for the next 2 hours? And you're like, okay, but that will be 3 AM, for me when I'm done.
And again, it just all sounds like excuses, right?
Right. And I feel so guilty all the time. And then to make mad, I have a family. My wife was kind of sick this past week. She's having trouble going to work because of being sick, but also we have these 2 young children and like you're trying to FaceTime with them and people are texting you, and I have a writing project I'm in the middle of. And also, like even the podcast tonight, we've been having trouble scheduling this. And so have you worked with people that like when they're on a job, they just like totally stop responding to you like 100%?
Yeah. I mean, I'm like that.
Yeah.
As a person who
you tried
to schedule a podcast on a weekly basis for the last 7 years, I'm like that. And frankly, it's not a conscious decision. It's just like,
you just don't look at your phone.
I just don't look at my phone. It's just, I'm obsessed with like being in the moment. And frankly, it's not always good advice. Because I know your schedule pretty well, and I'll text you without realizing, oh shoot, you're on set today. And I'm always astounded that you text me back.
Well, it could be just an unhealthy relationship I have with my phone, but I also like today, a friend of mine, like an old colleague of mine, like sent me a message. He's like, hey, I just left you a recommendation on LinkedIn. Do you mind leaving me a recommendation on LinkedIn? Like I'm trying to get this whole LinkedIn thing going on. And I'm like, this is like, there's nothing less important than this right now in my life.
You do it? Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it would be funny if I would write this. And then I like started coming up with like funny ideas for the recommendation. And I wrote it because it brought me like joy, and it was like a stress relief thing. And I actually like talking to my friends and stuff sometimes, like a friend will call me when I just happen to be in between like 2 things, and I'll pick it up because like I like that social aspect that I can't do, while I'm working.
And so the job that I'm on currently, we do really long takes. It's like
Oh, right. Like 20-minute takes.
20-minute takes for sure. Like, and we're not relighting things in the same way, or, you know, moving cameras in the same way. Like, it's a pretty locked off sort of situation. And so there's, you know, you have to be really active, but the rhythms of directing, of not only just like writing, prepping, shooting, editing, which is its own cycle that I love and miss, because I'm kind of doing all of those things all the time, all at once. But just like on a daily basis, yes, you're shooting for 12 hours, but like you show up, you answer a few questions, you grab yourself a breakfast burrito, you've got 15 minutes in the director's chair while just everyone else is working that you can think, you can reread your script, you can text your friends, and then you're in it and you're shooting. But then, you know, eventually you're going to say new deal, or like we're moving to a new location or whatever. And there are those just little moments of breath that make it feasible to, for instance, text your friend back or answer the phone or whatever, that like I have really been craving. I really miss it just because it keeps you sane, you know, like you need that time. And like our breaks are still longer. Like the turnover is like a minimum of like 45 minutes. So I still have that, but it's nice if it was just little bite sizes where you're just kind of like shooting a couple shots, relighting, shooting a couple shots, relighting. Just that rhythm I've missed very, very much.
Yeah. No, I mean, that I think is why we like directing, right? Is that fun of like, hey, we got this cool shot. Now let's see what the next cool shot's going to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that instant gratification is different.
Yeah. It's yeah. When you're working on like multiple projects too, like what you were just saying made me think of how you have to like shoot, write, plan, produce, post all at the same time. It's like, for me, I have like a meeting in the morning where I have to pitch the new direction for like my scripted project. And then I have to go into like doing selects, watching 2 hours of selects, and then getting on the phone and talking about character briefs. And then I need to get on a call for storyboarding. And then, but each one is for a different project. And I happen to be 3 of my projects, 2 of them are produced by Julie's, and my writing partner is also named Julie. So those 3 Julies, and my other 2 projects, the agency producers are named Nadia on both of them. The projects I have, the one here in Toronto and the one I have in LA coming back. And so you get an email and you don't even know like what project it's about. The last thing is that today, of all the days, art class, the new company I signed with, decided to do their big blitz of like promos that I signed with them. And so they're sending me messages like, hey, what do you think of this article? And what do you think of this picture? And of course, I'm not responding to them because I'm like in all these meetings, and they just put them out. They're like, hey, we put you out. Like, you're in these articles, these publications, this thing. Like, it's my responsibility to like repost and do all these things and do the self-promotion.
It is to a certain extent, but like the reason that a PR blitz exists is because a PR person has more connections and a greater reach than you do, right? So like Ad Age or Little Black Book Online or whatever, that's getting out there. Like, yes, do people in the industry follow you, and is it good for them to see what you're doing? Yeah, of course. It's don't throw that opportunity away, but at least rest assured that like that PR connection to other outlets is a greater reach than your personal one.
But don't you think, like you did that campaign with Retta, let's say it gets some Ad Age talks about it, or a few different places put a thing about it.
I think we did get an Ad Age blurb, actually.
Yeah. So don't you think the day that Ad Age blurb comes out, it's probably good for you to post like an Instagram story about something you're doing, or to respond to it? Yeah. Or if someone on LinkedIn is like, congrats, Matt, you should be like, hey, for sure, let's meet up for coffee. Like, you're given all these nuggets of opportunity.
It's a little window for sure.
And if you just totally ignore it, ghost that whole situation, which I'm sure some directors do, but just missed opportunities.
It is missed opportunity. I think also you could post next week. The people who are going to message you are still going to message you, Well, good luck. I mean, I think unfortunately the answer is just like grin and bear it to a certain extent.
Do you think there is some like transparency that is helpful? Like to say like, hey, I'm sorry. Like, do you think it's valuable saying like, I'm sorry if I'm like not being responsive or I'm not pulling my weight on this thing? Or do you just kind of,
trying to
talk your way through it.
I think that I've given this a lot of thought because I've been in scenarios where I've been transparent and been like, hey, like, I'm under a lot of stress for this reason or that, or like, you know, this project is really big, blah, blah, blah. Just, you know, explaining in a human and natural way why things aren't going as well as I've wanted. And I think, honestly, it mostly just hurts you. Do you know what I mean? Because like there's always a lot of stuff to be proud of and to focus on. And like, that's not to say that you should lie. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like putting on a strong front and leaning into the things that are going well inspires confidence in people and also doesn't draw attention to the things that need improvement. So if you're like, oh, I'm so sorry I'm late all the time, I've been really stressed out, or I'm running around in circles, just kind of reminds them that you're late and that you've been running around in circles. And then worst case scenario, you know, so their boss is like, oh, hey, how's Oren doing? Or the coworkers like, hey, how's Oren doing? And they're like, you know, he's like running around a lot. I think he maybe could use some help or whatever. Like I don't think that's ever really a good. Yeah. There's never a good result from that conversation typically, because no one's ever like, oh, you know what, let's hire him an assistant, or like, hey, let's add another day to the schedule. That's not how our business works, unfortunately. You just look a little bad to them. So look, that might be unhealthy advice. That hearing it, I can only imagine what a therapist would say. And maybe that plan takes years off our lives, but
I honestly wouldn't trust a therapist on filmmaker advice.
Yeah, you know, you just kind of like you've got it. You've got it. You know what to do. You're right. And when you're wrong, you know, pivot, change. Like, it's not toxic positivity is not what I'm trying to espouse, but like they are looking to you to have it under control.
There's some advice I've told myself in the past, which was, if I'm really feeling like I just not on top of all the details, I will try to delegate in some way. And I like walk to the producer and my producer, you know, on my team, and I'll say, hey, listen, I have like so many things that I have to keep track of in my brain. I'm not going to be able to keep track of like who is putting what outfit on in which scene. And I know we have our stylist that has that, but I'd love for you to delegate it to you to go talk to the stylist and make sure that they're ready for this, because I know this is like an important thing. And trying to just like tell people, like even on this project I'm on now, yesterday I had this like big pronouncement before our script meeting, which was like, hey, listen, this is incredibly ambitious and like things could go wrong. And so knowing that, like, I'm going to bring up some ideas of things we can mitigate, but like, I just want it to be in your mind to be like a little bit on defense, as opposed to like, let's see what more awesome things we can add. You know, and I think that is helpful. At the end of the day, like, I think you're still ultimately judged on the final product and not on your attitude.
I don't know that that's true, actually. I think that like walking out high, like feeling like, oh, we got it, this is going to be really good, regardless of how it ends up, like having a fun, positive attitude and an easy breezy set, even when things are hard, puts a good taste in everyone's mouths. And so when the client goes home to Chicago or wherever, and their boss is like, hey, how'd it go? And they're like, hey, look at my selfie, and it was really great, and Oren did such a good job. That primes them to like the product, because I don't know that necessarily there's a ton of objective truth in filmmaking of like what's good and what's bad. There are things that we're aiming for, and there are things that we hit the mark on and miss the mark on, relative to like the shared vision of what the goals were. But even that, as we've talked about many times, is not always a shared vision. And so you don't really have a ton of control over that. I think, though, going back a little bit earlier to what you were saying before of like calling out like, hey, not everything's going to go right, and so let's be on the defensive, is a very different attitude and take than I don't have things under control. Like your awareness that this is an ambitious situation and that you should have contingency plans is ownership, is power, is understanding the circumstances. It would be much worse if you were like overwhelmed and then caught by surprise. That's when it's bad. That's when you look bad. Do you know what I mean? When you're like frazzled and unable to deal with things and someone's like, oh boy, Oren's really dropping the ball over there. That's the problem. You know, that's when people lose confidence in you. That's what I'm trying to get at. Again, it's not about toxic positivity. It's about,
right. Because we've all seen those creatives that are like, everything's going to be so awesome. And you're like, well, I don't know if that's necessarily true. And then when it's not, everyone's like, what went wrong? And I'm like, well, that we just said everything was going to be great, but we didn't like put the plans in to make sure, you know, we had backup plans.
Yeah, it'll all work out is as bad as the sky is falling in certain circumstances. There's a world where you can be like, guys, I've done this a million fucking times and your plan's bad, so let's fix it. You could be that person, or you could be like, hey, speaking from experience, X, Y, and Z, let's work together to figure it out. The results are the same. So I take it back. The results are better when you are kind but firm, but speaking from a place of authority. And if you haven't delegated, let's say, or you haven't put on a strong front, then when you do need to raise these flags, it feels like you've just been crying wolf this whole time, you know, and it's just like, oh, but there's Oren spinning out again, you know. I'll keep my side of the overwhelmed story brief.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I thought you had kind of like talked about it a little bit, but I guess it wasn't like your official overwhelmed story.
Yeah,
so,
no, I pepper in. It's a co-hosting thing. But I would say that your point about delegation, I think, is right on. Whenever I'm like, I'm not getting enough things done, reaching out to your team is part of that for sure. And I have like lots of people, like not lots and lots of people, but like an ample number of people to help out with things. And so checking yourself on that front is always a thing, but then communication. The flip side of having a team of people that you're working with is making sure that everything is clearly communicated, and like that's a job unto itself. And there were so many moving parts with the projects that I'm on right now that it's been really easy to forget that one person isn't on Slack, or that, you know, this other stakeholder prefers email or whatever. And like, I find myself just like missing one of the 6 people because there's not a clean single way to tell everyone everything
all at once.
I know, I bit my tongue. It has been crazy making.
Just while you were talking, it made me think like of a tip. And I think beginner filmmakers like have a really hard time with delegation because everything is so tightly organized in their brain that when someone's like, well, here, I'll help you. Tell me what you need.
It's work
You're like,
to explain. Yeah.
I could never tell you. Like I'm the only person that knows like how these scenes work together, how these outfits work together, how the props work, so it's like good to get into the habit. And, you know, you are working on a big team, so you're in this habit, but even like Slack versus like a Google Doc, like it's good to get in the habit of just like starting to make.
We are across like Slack, Google Docs, Google Calendars, Asana, which is like a task management system, and text, basically all of those things.
But if you are like, hey, here's like a list of props, you know, and instead of just like keeping it in your brain or writing it on your script, if you put it in a Google Doc, you know, at some point you can be like, hey, I haven't figured out like all the props we need for this scene. But like, if you read the scene, here's like my list of like most of them. See if you can find any to add. Like if you're starting to kind of make things, images of references that you like, or locations that are interesting, or actors that you think could be right. Like the more you kind of put that out in like in digital documents, the more when it comes time to you realizing like, oh crap, I'm not going to be able to like make this entire cast Venn diagram. But you can send it to the AD and you're like 4/5 of the way there. It's like, I think filmmakers get good at like knowing what they need to tell their DP, their production designer, their wardrobe stylist early on. And then it's easier to delegate instead of panic when you realize you don't have enough time to do it all yourself.
I will say not the one thing, but one of the big things that I learned workflow wise in commercials is the power of the deck, not just as a pitch deck, but then as a working living document that is the repository for all information. Scripts are in there, schedules in there, the bios, the list of people, your cast, all of your art references, camera stuff. That can just be one big thing. And you can clone it out if you need to, like, you know, just send someone an art deck. That's easy enough to do. But keeping it as one deck that is not versioned up a ton, that is just, this is the deck, because that ultimately all that stuff ends up needing to be in the pre-pro deck or pre-pro book anyway. So having it in one place and being able to be like telling all of your crew, this is where that is. And then them seeing the big picture, like if the DP sees what swatches are coming in from wardrobe or whatever, that informs their understanding a little bit as well. And like, you're always just pointing at one link that everyone has.
Yeah. And I just want to point out, like, we're, you know, talking about commercials a little bit here, but like if you're doing your indie feature, like making a list of, like, we even were talking to Noah Bayshort, you know, our editor last week, about how he's got all these things he's got to do on his own now. But, you know, if you have a list of sounds that you feel like you're missing, you know, maybe it's something you could send off to someone, you know, but when you're like, hey, watch this movie and figure out what sounds need to go in there, it's a little bit of a bigger task. So I think the lesson for me, which I'm not doing a good job learning, is trying to figure out how to like think of delegation early on in the process, not when it's like too late when you're panicking.
When you're panicking, right? Because then you don't have time to explain yourself to anyone anyway.
Well, cool. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts on how you deal when you're overwhelmed. I know that everyone listening has had some time when they're overwhelmed, whether it's between their day job and their passion project or just a directing gig where they're arrived to shoot day and they just have no idea how they're going to get through it or what they're going to do. Like, what are some of the things that you do that you tell yourself? Like, one other kind of thing I do is I just tell myself, we're all human, and no matter what director they would have hired, they would have been dealing with the same issue. So as long as I do my best, like that's probably the best that could be done, you know? Like, it's not like I'm a failure. I'm just in a tough situation.
It does make me think of, I've been thinking a lot about mistakes because I've made a couple, and just a couple. Look, the types of mistakes that I'm used to making are creative ones where I'm like, I wish that I'd done that differently. But it's not an error. That's like a regret taste wise or aesthetic wise or whatever. Like, oh, I thought that was going to cut better, or the joke would be funnier if I'd done it that way or whatever. Today I made I just didn't loop someone in, just made a mistake. We've got a lot going on. So, you know, a few team members have similarly made mistakes in recent memory. The bear kind of encapsulates my attitude about mistakes, generally speaking, when a team member makes one.
I'm like 3 episodes into season 2.
Mild spoilers ahead. If you want to be totally pristine, I appreciate you. Fast forward a couple minutes. A character is basically tutoring. He's I can't remember the term for it, but basically apprenticing at a fancy restaurant in Chicago that I assume is basically supposed to be Alinea, which is like the gastroentomological restaurant where like you eat a cloud for dessert. There's a chef's table on it. It's like, you know, the kind of the magic tricks of high-end cuisine is what Alinea is famous for. Anyway, they're having their round table, and they're just talking about, everyone is, you know, they're all in their chef whites, and they're all standing around and they're talking about the menu, and they're like, okay, I'm going to bring this up one last time. The smudge. And the character who's apprenticing is like, what are they talking about? And they're like, the character says, I don't have a problem with you making mistakes. I'm not a child, but I want you to own up to it. We lost 45 seconds on the smudge. Who made the smudge? And it's just a funny, quick little scene that is about perfectionism or whatever. Someone smudged a plate. And how I feel, like, I don't mind if you make a mistake at all. Call it out, fix it. we can fix it together, or keep it from happening ever again. But so not to step on my unpaid endorsement, but boy, the Bear season 2, man.
Well, speaking of unpaid endorsements.
Unpaid endorsements.
So to step on it, Bear season 2, like most great television shows, it really found its groove. You love the characters. They're doing what they're doing. It's really, truly great. So I know that there's a lot to watch out there, but that's awesome. And then also, everyone, I haven't watched it yet, but you know what I'm going to do right after this? Love Island is back on television on Peacock. I cannot wait. So highbrow and lowbrow, you know? Anyway, Kaplan, what you got?
I got 3 things real quick. Number 1, kill fees.
Ooh.
Ask for them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Did you
do a whole episode on them?
Yeah. Wait, did you get one recently?
I just got one.
Full rate?
It was, no. Because I'd gotten the job pretty quick and I'd only worked on it for like 3 days before it got canceled and we never shot anything. What percentage of my rate do you think I should have gotten?
70%?
70%?
I mean, oftentimes I'll get a full fee for my kill fee. I
got 25% of my fee.
That's less than, yeah.
Yeah, I guess. So they wanted to postpone it till after the strike or whatever. And I was like, who knows if that's going to happen? Can I get a kill fee? And they gave me 25%.
Yeah.
I don't even know if anyone else on the crew got a kill fee or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. So I think some people don't realize that a kill fee is even a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I'm bringing it up.
I think it is a privileged situation. I think crew members, if you're canceling 24 hours.
No, if you're canceling,
24, 48, depending on circumstances, that's different. You know, directors, we're long-term workers, though. It's a different deal. We're not day players, you know?
But if you're a producer, writer, even like a cinematographer, production designer has already sketched out schematics and things for sets. Like if you're one of those people and you've done a good amount of work and then a job goes away after you've been told like very specifically that you have the job.
You know, also the difference is that we are paid our day rate, even though that's kind of implied that there's prep time, but it's not. Like a production designer, I'd be like, I've got you for a week of prep. Your prep time starts now. So like if you cancel,
you still pay them for the prep.
You're still paying them for the prep. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the difference and why kill fees are more of a thing for people like us. Anyway, great endorsement. Get them if you can, for sure.
Next reco, eye masks. You ever use these things when you're trying to sleep and it's bright out?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Use them. It makes such a huge difference. And if I don't have an eye mask, I mean, everyone knows this, right? But light it's very hard to sleep in light. It's just bad for your brain to try to sleep when it's light out. So if you don't have an eye mask, put a pillow on your face. Do it all the time. Third one is another stupid one, but like, it's something that I've been doing a lot lately, and I don't know if people know you can do this. Maybe everyone knows, but you know, if you buy a new iPad or an iPhone in like the last 2 years, you get this charger, 20-watt charger, but it has the USB-C port on it. I use it for my MacBook.
Oh,
instead of using the giant MacBook charger.
How big is how many volts is the big MacBook charger?
The big one is 85 watts. I think this is like 20 or 30 watts, the small brick, but it's enough to keep it's not going to fast charge your computer, but it's enough to keep it running. Yeah. So like right now, so I love it. I have my big one, but I never use it. I just use this tiny one, and you can plug it in like on the airplane and so, you know, places where you don't want to have those giant chargers. Just use the one that came with your iPad or your iPhone and a USB-C cable. You can keep your MacBook alive. Oh, by the way, can I say one last thing? Our producer, Tyler, is going to work with me on this LA job.
Oh, awesome.
Which is cool. Tyler Small. So, hey, you know, sometimes it helps to just ask someone if they need you.
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, have fun, guys. If you have any questions for us, you can always tweet at us or I guess not threads at us yet or whatever that is. DM us on Instagram. You can reach out to us at JustShootItPod across all social media. If you have a longer question, you can email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com. And you can find me at Mr. Maddenlow across all social media except for Threads, but especially Letterboxd.
And I'm at OKaplan on Threads and Instagram. Same thing. This episode was edited by Noah Bayshore. Our producer is Tyler Small. And you're listening to music from the Free Music Archive and the artist Jazar. We will catch you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Goodbye.